Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to Thriving in Challenging Times on behalf of the entire Southpaw Consulting Group. We're glad you're with us. My name is Vivette Payne, and I'm going to be your moderator. Let me ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll get started. And Audrey, I'll start with you.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm glad to be gathering with my colleagues and to have a conversation about thriving in challenging times. I'm a professor of business administration, psychology, public and international affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm also a consultant that does a lot of work on mentoring, leadership development, and diversity and inclusion. Great to be here today.
Thanks, Audrey. Jeanette?
Thank you so much, Vivette. It's so good to be here. I'm Jeanette Southpaw. I come with 40 years of experience in academic medicine. I've been involved not only with direct patient care, but with teaching medical students, undergrads, medical residents, as well as a lot of peer work with other faculty. I have served in leadership positions in a number of volunteer organizations and spent a lot of time talking about personal development, professional development, diversity, inclusion, and well-being. It's good to see you all today.
Thank you, Jeanette. And Tanya.
Hi, everyone. I am Tanya Tinsley, and I identify myself as a scholar practitioner. I am an associate professor at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania in the Counseling and Human Services Department. My specialties are sports counseling, spiritual and Christian interventions in counseling, and multicultural and social justice issues. And as a practitioner, I am a licensed professional counselor, a national board certified counselor in private practice, where I provide individual, family, and group counseling to individuals across the lifespan. And then I also consult with churches and faith-based organizations, higher education institutions, and organizations that are focusing on multicultural and social justice issues.
Thank you, Tanya. Let me take down the screen so I can see everybody. Let me just make a few introductory remarks for us. You know, for each of us, being at our best is a goal that we have every day, despite the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But when we're faced with challenging circumstances, that often challenges our self-confidence. And we wonder, how are we going to survive, much less thrive in these kind of situations? So our webinar today is going to discuss how do resilient individuals deal with high pressure, high demand situations, and yet they remain optimistic, inspired, and confident. We're going to work through this I'm going to pose questions to our panelists and let them respond. And then if you have questions you want to put in the chat, we'll try to get to some of those as well. So let's get started with our first question. You know, one of the issues we often deal with in high pressure situations is fear. That often besets us in difficult times. So my first question is, how do you stay self-aware when you find yourself overcome by feelings of fear or an inability to cope? Jeanette, let me start with you.
You know, I think that fear is a reality that we all face. And for most of us in the professional world, it's not something you want to admit. It's that secret weakness that helps to destabilize you. And so often we don't want to admit or discuss it because we believe we're the only ones experiencing it. And therefore, that sense of vulnerability that, oh my gosh, I'm the only person here who's weak, who's not feeling confident, and therefore I don't want to share it with others. And the reality is, it is a universal human state that everyone experiences at one or more times in their lives. And the operative word is probably more. And the first thing I try to do is reset the framework and say, you know, I'm not alone in this. So what are the elements that I'm experiencing that are contributing to this. Because if you let the fear overtake you, you actually can't see the data. You can't see the reality. What you are worried about often overwhelms the true aspects of what's going on. So the first thing I try to do is say, I am not alone. This is an important thing because that in and of itself moves us from one lane into another lane.
Good. Other comments, Tanya or Audrey?
Sure, and I appreciate Jeanette giving a kind of an overview of fear. I often think about, in order to be aware, it's important to understand just what is fear. Fear can be an acronym: false evidence appearing real, unpleasant emotion caused by a belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. It could be a feeling of anxiety. So I really think about fear as a thought, a belief, so the cognitive piece, but also the feeling piece, the anxiety that comes, an unpleasant emotion, and it can gnaw at a person day and night. And oftentimes people want to push the fear away. And so I say it's important to be mindful of how you're feeling and thinking. And that's what mindfulness is. It's really taking time to pay attention to how you're feeling, even those unpleasant feelings, giving space for those feelings, owning your feelings, accepting those feelings, but not judging yourself on those feelings. And just really pay attention to how those feelings and thoughts can be impacting you in your body as well, because those fears could increase stress and fatigue. And so I really say, when it comes to managing the fear, allow yourself to be mindful, stay in the present, because the fear can cause you to focus on the past, or it can cause you to focus on the future. And it's really important to stay in the here and now, own your feelings, accept your feelings, be patient with yourself, and give yourself grace.
Very good. Yeah. Let me just add to something Jeanette said, and that is realizing you're not alone. I think it's very important the people with whom we associate. Who is in our network and who are we spending time with? Because I think in situations where it's high pressure, high demand, sharing what's going on, what's happening, allowing yourself to get support from other people is critical. And I can't do that if I'm internalizing it and don't want to talk about it. But in fact, reaching out to others who you know will be supportive, they may have experienced it, they have good counsel, but I think it's important to not isolate yourself, but really talk with others about it, especially those who you know tend to be more resilient in their lifestyle. Audrey, anything you want to add?
No, I think to just echo what you said about making sure that you have good support. And I think the other thing about fear is to pay attention over time about what your triggers are. So what are certain situations, certain events, certain people or circumstances that tend to trigger a fear response? And why that becomes important is because you got to really develop resilient and proactive and positive coping, right? And so you can activate that coping if you pay attention to the pattern of the triggers. And so it's really important. You know, there are certain situations where I actually can expect that I'm going to start walking into a situation, very unfamiliar situations with certain types of people that I've had conflict with in the past. And so I already know, I'm already prepared for that fear response. And so I can activate coping because I'm learning from my own history and from feedback from other people. I've had close colleagues and peers of mine saying, you know, when you're in this kind of situation, you tend to act this way. And so recognizing those triggers can help you activate coping. And so that would be what I've added to already what people have said.
All right, very good. Let's move on to the second question. You know, when I started the webinar, I talked about the fact that resilient people in high stress, high demand remain positive, inspired, confident. So I want to ask our panelists, specifically, what do you see resilient people do when they're really under pressure? There are a lot of demands. How do they remain confident and empowered? What do you see them do?
You know, one of the things that I have found is that when I have been in executive types of positions, I recognize how I must anchor my day. I know the day will become rapidly unpredictable. I start with a little notebook. I'm writing down the things that need to be accomplished. I'm trying to get them in chronological order, knowing full well that things are going to happen that I did not predict, but trying to be able to recenter on those things that must get accomplished that day. But I also realize that if you don't start your day in the right framework, you can't establish that centeredness to be able to move forward. For me, that's starting the day with prayer, and that's starting the day with exercise, those two things. And I put them together because they feed different parts of my body, and they feed things that I find are essential to having the strength to move forward the rest of the day. So starting the day well, having an organized framework, knowing that the framework will be shaking, but that it will allow me to continue to recenter.
All right.
Yeah, I would chime absolutely into what Jeanette said, and I think it's all part of developing your own personal resilient habits, you know. And so for me, I do not function well with not enough sleep. I've just learned that over time, and it's true. The older that I get, the worse it gets. And so in periods where things are busy or in high crunch periods, I have to make myself get more sleep, because I already know, for me, that's a resilient habit. You know, I've got to watch my caffeine intake. There's certain things that I have to do. And there are certain people who I reach out to who I already know will pour into me and will support me, and that are part of that network that Vivette talked about. And so there's this little personal toolkit of resilient habits that I've developed over time, and with feedback and support from others. And I have to learn how to tap into that during those periods. It's been very helpful.
Very good. Tanya, anything?
Yes, I just want to say, I really appreciate what Audrey just said in terms of tapping into those tools. I'm a believer we live and we learn. And when I think about resilient individuals in high demand, they have a high level of self-awareness, and we just talked about self-awareness, a high level of knowledge about themselves and the context around them, and the skills and tools to manage the challenges they face. But when those tools are no longer working, that is a flag to say, I need to go back and become more aware of what's happening right now, because we live in a world that's forever changing. So we as individuals are changing, and the tools that we may use may change as well. So when things are no longer working and those tools and skills are no longer working, go back to increase your level of awareness in terms of being mindful. How are you thinking? How are you feeling? What are triggers? But also getting the knowledge to understand what's happening to you personally and professionally.